A couple days ago, I just finished watching the final season of Superman and Lois, and the finale was beautiful. Talked about the beauty of human life. Talked about all the little things we can appreciate that make our life complete and full. So this, in comparison, just maybe a little bit different. What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Anderson here, and this is Joker. Yes, I know I'm coming into this very, very late, but I'm trying to catch up on all the DC movies that I've missed, including some of the shows, and this happened to be the first one that I didn't go see in theaters. I don't know exactly why, because I heard a lot of good things about it. It's one that I wanted to watch at some point. Yeah, for some reason I ended up skipping it, and I kept telling myself I'll watch it eventually, and then I just never got around to it. But now that I've decided to go through all the DC movies that I missed, now we can finally talk about it, finally get my thoughts out there, because obviously a lot of people have had a lot of thoughts. I've seen a couple of headlines and article titles about the movie that I've not read through, because obviously I didn't want to be spoiled on anything. And unfortunately, I did know a couple things about this movie. I mean, it's hard not to see anything about this movie when it first came out, because it was all over. But there was a lot about this that I still didn't know, so I still came into it somewhat blind. But looking at it as a whole, it's a very difficult movie to pin down. I can definitely see some of the messages that are in it, some of the messages that might be taken out of it. For me personally, I see this as a very masterfully told cautionary tale of what can happen if you basically overlook the poor and downtrodden in our society. It's also a really good message in there about mental illness and how everybody's mental illness is different, how dangerous overlooking mental illness can be as well. And then of course it's also just a great backstory for one of the greatest comic book villains of all time. But we'll start with the Joker himself. Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck was absolutely brilliant in this. The acting, the laugh, the emotion, all of it was just so well done. I think ultimately you really have to get that part down, because if you don't, then you're just watching this guy who's absolutely crazy and you're like, why am I watching this? But because of how well Joaquin Phoenix does at showing the softer side of Arthur and the side that does want to be recognized, wants to feel love, you see those sides of him and you do feel that bit of sympathy. Obviously, when he does all the awful things, I think that's when it snaps a lot of people out of it. You realize, oh my God, he's crazy. But in those quieter moments, in those softer moments, you do feel for him and you do want him to succeed. And I think it's such a good dichotomy, because you don't really know how to feel by the end of it, because he has been so mistreated by so many people. And you want to see those people get their comeuppance, but at the same time, Arthur's just basically going around murdering everybody. You can't really support that. So again, I think a lot of that is down to Joaquin Phoenix's acting and how well he brings that emotion out of Arthur. The writing too, I think, does him a great service, because it really gets to showcase that desire to be loved, desire to be cared for. I think the best example of all of that is when we see those moments in his head. We see him being on Murray's show, with Murray welcoming him down on the stage, telling him that it's a beautiful thing that he said. We also see those moments with Sophie, which I will say, to me, it was a little obvious that she wasn't going to be real. I don't know if it was for everybody else, because they did kind of play up those scenes whenever they were showing what was actually happening. They did play it up as like a, holy crap, guys, I bet you didn't see this coming. And honestly, I kind of saw it coming. I think the biggest one was when he went into her apartment and started making out with her. That wouldn't happen. Maybe Sophie is as crazy as him, but I don't think so, from that one little moment in the elevator. But in those scenes, we do get to see what Arthur really wants. And I think that really, again, helps us feel that bit of sympathy for him. And that if it wasn't there, I don't think this movie would have been as impactful. Because I know it's something that's been talked about a lot recently, having these sympathetic villains in these movies, and how many people are kind of getting sick of it. I think the problem is, it's not that we've had sympathetic villains. I don't think that's the issue. I think we have had an overabundance of it, to the point where now we don't have villains that are just evil and enjoy doing bad things. But I think also it feels like if you just give them a reason for why they're doing what they're doing that other people can relate to and make them sad about it and make them seem like they care about something, I feel like that's kind of the bare bones sympathetic villain. And I think that's been a lot of the problem, is a lot of those villains do end up being way too simplistic. But if you can get your audience to connect to the villain, if you can get them to go, I kind of see where he's coming from, that's when I think the sympathetic villains are at their best. And this was a good example of that. And I think that's what makes those moments whenever he does do something like shoot those guys on the subway, stab the one guy that gave him the gun, I don't remember his name now, unfortunately, or when he shoots Murray on the show, all of those moments, when they happen, I can't speak for everybody else who watched it, obviously, but for me, it was just like this gut-wrenching, oh my God, because you do care for him, and seeing him do these awful things kind of makes you feel guilty. Some of them did kind of deserve it. The one guys were just kicking the crap out of him when he shot him, so it was almost self-defense. But then he chases down the one guy who's just running away. That's not self-defense. That's just straight up cold-blooded murder. So it's that back and forth that I think really connected to a lot of the audience, which is why this movie was so interesting to a lot of people. Because I do think most of us would not do a lot of what he did, even in his situation. But you throw on that the fact that he has this mental illness, I think that sort of plays into it as well. And it's something that a lot of us can't relate to. And so that's where it's hard to put yourself in his shoes because we don't see the world like he does. But moving on from Arthur, all the side characters around him, I think, really played into the story really well. Hearing that his mother adopted him, she had mental issues, she let her boyfriends do all these awful things to Arthur, kind of does explain a lot of why he is the way he is. And again, feeds into that sympathy you feel for him. I think Sophie, even though she was in his head, you still do see that he gets confidence from feeling appreciated. And so I think in that moment, whenever he realizes the truth, that sort of takes all that away from him. And that's when he fully crashes out and decides, I don't have any reason to live anymore. I don't know if they talk about it because I do plan to watch the second Joker movie. I've heard it's not good, but I don't know if they bring up Sophie again. I kind of hope they don't, because I think the ambiguity of whether or not he did anything to her and her daughter when he left her apartment, I think that's a lot scarier than if we find out he did kill her or he didn't kill her. The guys that worked with him at the, I think it was a talent agency or contractor business, something like that, they played their parts well too. The guy that gave him the gun, it was kind of hard to tell whether or not he actually did give it to him to help protect himself, or if he was being a bit malicious with it, trying to get him fired. Because the thing is, he told the boss that, oh yeah, he was trying to buy a gun off of me. But that could have been him trying to cover his own ass, because he didn't want to be found out that he's the one that gave Arthur the gun. And it did kind of seem like when he went to the apartment, he was checking on Arthur, maybe seeing if they could corroborate their stories, because he didn't want to see Arthur get in trouble. I could be wrong about all that. Maybe I'm misreading it. And then I think his name was Gary, was the other guy. It did seem like Gary did really like Arthur, and Arthur even said, you're the only one that was ever nice to me. But considering those were the guys that Arthur interacted with the most outside of his mother, but I thought they did add some good moments with Arthur just to see him bounce off of some other people that are also a little bit weirder, but not quite as weird as Arthur is. But I thought the scenes with them and Arthur were nice because they showed people who were kind of on the similar level to Arthur as far as they're down on their luck, working this kind of rough job that doesn't pay well, but it gives them something. I think having him meet the Waynes, very nice decision. It does show how Thomas Wayne was so influential in a lot of what he did, even after he finds out he's not actually his father. There still is that connection with Thomas going on TV, basically calling all of these people clowns, saying that he's the only one that can help them when a lot of them don't think he's doing anything for him. And of course, leading to that moment in the alley that we all know so well. I think it all really connects with having Arthur think he's Thomas Wayne's son for a little bit, but also showing how Thomas Wayne is interacting with this world that Arthur is kind of building with a lot of his comments and what he does as the clown. The final one to talk about is Murray, and this is probably the most interesting dynamic in the movie for me, because we see how Arthur really looks up to Murray. He wants to be like him. He tries to mimic a lot of the stuff that he does. Like I said, we see the one moment in his head whenever he's on Murray's show and tells him how much he loves him, and Murray welcomes him down and all of that. But something that's very intriguing in all of this is when he gets invited onto Murray's show, we see him practicing his entrance alongside the one guy that's on the TV. So I could be misreading this, but for me, that's kind of interesting to see. He used to look up to Murray and almost try to copy some of what he did, and now he's copying a guest that's on Murray's show. Now, obviously that could be, well, he's just copying that because he wants to mimic somebody who has been on the show, and because he sees the success that this guy had on the show, he wants to replicate that. But this is also at the time whenever he's planning on killing himself. So I do wonder at what point did that flip? Because even when he's in his dressing room, we see him once again point the gun at his own head. So I'm curious at what point did that turn and he realized, you know what? I'm not the one that needs to go. He's the one that needs to go. He's the one that deserves to have a bullet in his head. For me personally, I almost feel like it's when Murray starts calling him out for what he did to the three guys on the subway. Because I think up until that point, he just saw it as a joke. as he said. But the more Murray sort of pushed him, the more he sort of realized, no, it's what they deserved. And it's what people like Murray deserve too, because they were awful people. I think that whole conversation between Murray and Arthur was so fascinating to watch. But you can see the points being made on both sides. And while Arthur does point out a lot of the flaws with how the system works and all of that, Murray does point out, I think, sort of the common sense of it, which is you can't just go around shooting people and just think it's okay. I think especially with where we're headed, I feel like since this movie's come out, it's only gotten worse and worse. And for me, this conversation is where the movie goes from telling this interesting backstory about one of the best villains in comic book history to being that cautionary tale showing what people can become if they are overlooked, if you don't give them the proper help that they need. So for me, a lot about this is just very well handled, very well written, and it does make you think. And I think a lot of the best movies, that's what they do. They get you to question, they get you to talk about, discuss these things. Because a lot of the opinions I have about this movie, some people may have completely different opinions. And again, that's part of why I started this channel to begin with, is to discuss those opinions. But I think this is where comparing it to a lot of the DC stuff that I've been watching, which is the Arrowverse, a lot of that was so bare bones. It doesn't create discussion. It basically squashes discussion. It says, hey, here's how you should think. Everybody else who thinks this way is wrong. I feel like for this movie, it does a good job of bringing up a discussion and letting people make their own opinions, letting people decide who's right, who's wrong, and how should we handle it. But bravo to this movie. Did a really good job with what it was trying to do, in my opinion. It definitely made me tense up in a lot of scenes, made me feel something for these characters, and definitely brought about a lot of conflicting emotions. I think it's a good way to kick off this trek into DC movies, especially because I know what's coming after this. I'm definitely not looking forward to a lot of that, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Until then, those are my thoughts on this movie. So with all that being said, cue the outro. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that review. I hope you enjoyed it. First and foremost, please leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I love having discussions with people, so whatever your thoughts were, whether you agree or disagree with me, please leave them down below. Obviously, no spoilers. Also, if you did find yourself enjoying this review and you want to see more, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me out. I also have a gaming channel as well as a channel where I talk about soccer, so if you want to give those a follow as well, that would be much appreciated. And lastly, if you want to help me improve upon the quality of these channels, I do have a Patreon. All of this is in the description below. With all that being said, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to y'all later. Peace out.